What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you an update on Baldur's Gate 3 and everything patch 8 is bringing to the game. So, of course, following Larian Studios' Panel from Hell, I believe number 6 actually, they gave us all of the information on patch 8. It's actually playable right now. If you have access to early access, you can go test all this out and look at it yourself if you please. But I will be throwing the full patch notes down in the description below as it is very lengthy. We're going to hit the highlights, I'm going to give some thoughts, but understand that this patch is huge. It's about 35 gigs total with a ton of fixes, changes, tweaks, very substantial patch. But highlights. Primarily, they are adding gnomes and the Bard class. The Bard is, of course, a sort of control and support class. They deal a lot of psychic damage, they inspire their allies, they have a lot of control spells that help with the battlefield, and of course, they do all of this with a musical flair. It's a very flavorful class. They have a cantrip that they can pick up called Vicious Mockery. This is actually going to be voiced with 97 insults, is the official number at the moment. I guess that could potentially grow. But when you use Vicious Mockery, essentially it's a cantrip that sees you being rude or mean to an enemy that deals then psychic damage. And all of these insults are voiced, which is kind of hilarious. But bards also get Bardic Inspiration. This is essentially a bonus to things like your attack rolls, ability checks, that type of stuff. They can inspire someone. A much more interesting change when it comes to bards is expertise. So expertise has been added to the game. This will affect bards and rogues. Rogues get access to it right at level 1, but expertise is an extra level of proficiency. So if you are proficient in something, you get a bonus to it. Well, expertise doubles that bonus. So as they level up, bards and rogues can take expertise in certain things that makes them incredible at those things because it just straight up doubles your proficiency bonus. Bards will also be able to pick a starting instrument. This will affect a few things, but obviously their bardic performance, as bards are able to perform. This actually takes a form of a lot of things. So for starters, it is an actual performance. You'll be able to click into it. There's a few different types of performance you can play, like something more upbeat or something more down tempo, that type of stuff. But interestingly enough, they've worked this into the actual world quite a bit. So you'll essentially make a performance check, and then any character around you that is capable of performing can join in on the performance. So NPCs that are bards or have instruments can join in on your performance. If you make a successful performance check, a crowd can even gather and give you money, etc. But this actually has even more implications because this will effectively distract NPCs. They will move away from where they normally stand. So you could potentially use a bard to distract a group and then have other party members take advantage of that distraction, which is a very cool gameplay addition in my opinion that makes the bards just by themselves right then very useful. Now you will be able to pick up other instruments and things as you play the game, so this isn't final, but it affects a lot of stuff. Now in terms of subclass, the bard gets the College of Lore and College of Valor. The College of Valor leans more into the simple weapon proficiencies of the bard. They get an even better inspiration called Combat Inspiration that can give your allies better boosts in combat, and they are just themselves capable of dealing more physical damage. And then there is the College of Lore. This particular subclass leans more into the spellcasting, as you might imagine, and also gives you the ability to apply a penalty to enemy rolls, as opposed to just inspiration. And then we move on to the gnomes. Gnomes are, well, they're gnomes. They are very intelligent. All of the gnome subraces get a +2 to intelligence. There are 3 subraces right now, and each of them gives various little bonuses like dark vision, stealth, that type of stuff. All of them will have a gnome's cunning, which is a racial trait that gives them advantage on mental checks. Now, we did actually know gnomes were coming because this was leaked by Sven himself a little while back. So not a surprise to see them in this update, but nonetheless pretty cool. Again, gnomes, while not necessarily the most popular race in the world, get a ton of bonuses that make them a worthwhile addition to checking out, especially if you're trying to like min-max something, especially anything that relies on intelligence. Now, some other really cool changes that is by no means the total list here. For starters, Detect Thoughts. This is a spell that of course allowed you to detect thoughts. Previously, you had to cast this before you initiated conversation. Well, they changed that and rolled it into a dialogue option. So if your character knows the Detect Thoughts spell, it now shows up as a dialogue option where you can cast Detect Thoughts, which essentially just makes it a lot more useful, as previously it was very clunky to use and thus a lot of people just did not use it. Now, the UI saw extensive updates, things to like tooltips, the layouts, etc. But the one thing I really wanted to call out in terms of the UI updates were the updates to the spell menus. This made it much easier to see every spell that a character knows, etc. They've just got this nice upgraded menu. And in addition to that, you can use this menu to learn spells from scrolls. So you just click a button, you see all the scrolls in your inventory, what those scrolls are actually worth money-wise, and then what that character can transcribe as known spells. So making just dealing with spells much easier, and it's all kind of handled from that menu now. And then there is the upcasting UI. So this doesn't affect just spells, it actually affects a lot of stuff. But now when you click on an ability that has like multiple options, it'll bring up a little sub menu that kind of rolls over the main one and lets you pick the option of that you want to. So for instance, if you're upcasting a spell, you'll click the spell on your hotbar and then it will bring up a menu where you can choose what level of that spell you would like to cast, which is its primary use, but this also affects any ability that has a similar function, like for instance, the Bard's Performance. When you click Bard's Performance, it'll bring up what type of performance you would like to perform. Beyond that, there were extensive changes to character creation, just giving more options, basically hair highlights, the types of hair, skin colors, all that type of stuff. So just enhanced character customization. In game, we actually see the addition of facial animations, which will allow characters to show emotion throughout the conversation. So whatever a character is telling you with them zoomed up in on that character's face, it will now be more representative of how that character is supposed to be speaking, which is nice. And then probably the most exciting change for me personally was the Swarm AI. Now, one thing you can say about turn-based combat is that it is slow. And one thing I'm actually really excited about for BG3 in general is that they are attempting to make substantial changes to the flow of the turn-based combat to do everything they can to speed it up. And one of the major additions to that is Swarm AI. Now, this will only be toggled on basically in select fights, so it won't be available in every fight. But basically any large fight that has a lot of smaller units that are all essentially the same thing, like a small goblin, that type of thing, all of those individual characters will now all take their turn at the exact same time. So rather than having to wait for them each to take their action, which takes forever, every single one of those characters will now all take their turn at once, which should drastically speed up a lot of the bigger fights where that tends to be an issue, such as the Goblin Village. Now, those are some of the highlights that I thought were really cool, but again, full list is down below. This is a huge patch. Honestly, a lot of it is behind the scenes stuff that I don't think a lot of people will really notice as much, but is nonetheless very positive for the game overall. Now, broad thoughts. I obviously like the addition of the class. I think we're just missing Paladin and Monk now off the top of my head. And seeing more races get added is also nice, as we're still missing a few from the player's handbook, I believe. So nice additions. But my actual thoughts about this patch are that they've very clearly kind of switched to primarily, not exactly polish, but tightening things up. So they still have some major things to add. Again, there are classes missing, etc. So I would not call this feature complete by any means, but they've made a very clear shift to making the feel of the game better, as a substantial amount of this patch is directed and aimed at making the entire experience just more enjoyable through minor changes, like the detect thoughts thing, and countless other changes that just make, again, the entire experience just that much better. And in Sven's own words, in the panel from Hell, they are moving towards the finish line. They still have a few things to add, but they themselves consider that to be in the later stages of development, or moving towards the final stages, if you will, which would put the game on track for the roughly Q1, Q2 release of next year that they were aiming for. And broadly speaking, my only real concern for the game at this point, because clearly it's getting a ton of love, there's just a lot of little stuff that's going to make this game so much better that they are very clearly addressing and they very clearly have a passionate team for. But I would tell you my one concern overall is that anything that was not in this early access period is probably going to be in a noticeably worse state. A lot of people don't want the game spoiled, etc., and I get it. So I'm not saying that they should test the later stuff, but understand that when the game comes out, anything that was not in early access is likely to have many more bugs and encounter many more problems than the stuff that was. And for a gigantic, complicated game like this, my personal concern is the quality of basically everything outside of early access when the game actually launches. But I do think the initial experience, which honestly most people are probably going to spend all of their time on, is going to be very polished. But it's the everything else that I'm worried about. There you guys go. An update on patch 8 for Baldur's Gate 3. Overall, it is honestly looking tremendous. I think the game is shaping up very well. And while in general D&D 5e isn't exactly my favorite system overall, I do really like what they're doing going with this. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.